Hello and welcome to the Essex Boys Murder Case Part 25. If watching this video, I recommend watching Part 4 onwards on YouTube first, as these videos are all about the key individuals and the murder victims' movements on the day of the 6th of December 1995. And a quick mention to the Facebook page called The Real Essex Boys Murder Club. If you're interested, please feel free to join. There's some great people on there with a lot of knowledge on this subject. So what we'll do is carry on where we left off from last time, which was with Darren Nichols parked up on Meadow Road about a quarter of a mile from the Rettendon farm track. To begin with, I just want to start talking about Jeffrey Cousins, who was in the Witness Protection Programme with Darren Nichols at the time. As they were both waiting to give evidence in their up-and-coming trials as supergrassers, they became quite close and confided in each other. I'm not going to go through his whole statement, but I do want to pick up on a few things he said. So I'm just going to read a small part to begin with from his statement. I first met Darren Nichols on the 24th of October 1996 when he was introduced into the Witness Protection Scheme. When a new person joins the Witness Protection Scheme, there is a natural interest by other members in the unit to find out who they are and their involvement in the scheme. Darren Nichols was no exception, as he readily spoke to members of the unit about the Rettendon Range Rover murders. The murders had been the subject of extensive publicity in the national press, and I was certainly aware that they had been committed. Darren was only in the Witness Protection Unit for a few days before he was returned to police custody. During this period, I recall he was in general conversation with the inmates on the unit. He told them that while he had no prior knowledge of or involvement in the murders. Right, I'm just going to pause and stop at this part of the statement. The last sentence. He told me that while he had no prior knowledge of or involvement in the murders. Now, Darren Nichols has to say this. He's been coached into saying this, most probably by the police, because if he does say he was more involved in the murders and knew the murders were going to take place, then he can't be used as a supergrass, because as I've mentioned in a previous video, he will be admitting to being involved in the murders, and he too will face a hefty prison sentence. Also, the Defence Counsel could pick holes in his testimony if he was more involved. So the second statement of Darren Nichols was, without doubt, well scripted. I mean, if he admits to a lesser sentence, say of selling cannabis, then he would get off and get a smaller sentence, and he would only have to do a few years then. You see, Mick Steele and Jack Wombs have their backs against the wall now. They can't say Darren Nichols was in with it and he was more involved, because they will be admitting to the murders. Mick Steele and Jack Wombs now have a choice. They can admit to being involved in the murders and say Darren Nichols was part of it. So if they go down, then they can make sure Darren Nichols goes down with them. Or deny any involvement in the Range Rover murders, take their chances with the jury finding them not guilty due to the evidence being mostly circumstantial. I mean, Mick Steele and Jack Wombs went no comment when the police put questions to them about the murders and what Darren Nichols had said. If you're not involved in the murders, wouldn't you plead your innocence and have explanations to the questions the police are asking you? Saying no comment usually means you're guilty and you don't want to put yourself in it. Basically, go no comment so you don't trip yourself up and let the police try and prove you're guilty. Just going back to the statement of Geoffrey Cousins, and another part I would like to pick up on is this part. He had taken 2 men in his car to the murder scene. 4 men arrived at the scene in the Range Rover, and after the murders had been committed, Darren took 3 men from the scene in his car. When he told his version of events, which was on an almost daily basis, he always laboured to the point that he had no prior knowledge that the men were going to be shot. I informed the impression that he did know and was lying. The impression was just my gut feeling based on the amount of times he kept denying his involvement over and over again. So while in the witness protection scheme, Darren Nichols told Geoffrey Cousins, who was also on the scheme, that he had taken 2 men in the Passat to Rettendon that night. Not 1, but 2. Not just Jack Wombs, but someone else. I mean, as we know, Mick Steele went in his Hilux with Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, following in convoy in the Range Rover to the Hungry Horse pub car park in Rayleigh. Now, Darren Nichols might have been lying about this, so let's not rule this out, but he may not have been. In a previous video, I did mention that Mick Steele, Jack Wombs and Darren Nichols could have met someone at the Halfway House pub car park prior to the murders taking place. Maybe the real killer, a no questions asked hitman hired by Mick Steele, Jack Wombs and Darren Nichols from an East London crime family to take out all 3 well-known criminals in the Essex area. Did Darren Nichols drive a hitman and Jack Wombs to the White House farm trap that night? The assassin and Jack Wombs got into position down the track. I mean, Jack Wombs knows the gates locked due to his recce the day before the murders. Jack Wombs admitted to being in the Rettendon area on the 5th of December. Was he doing one final check to find out if the gate was shut at a certain time? There's people out there who think Mick Steele, Jack Wombs and Darren Nichols played their part in luring Tucker, Tate and Rolfe to Rettendon that night for a professional contract killer to take them out quickly with accuracy. Someone who's killed before and would not hesitate to pull the trigger. Jack Wombs had connections to a well-known crime family in London East End back then, and Mick Steele could have paid for their services for a contract killer. It is possible that Darren Nichols drove 2 people to the track that night. Maybe this is why Mick Steele and Jack Wombs have never given their sides of events all these years due to reprisals from the crime family maybe. I mean, it's not just them who would be in danger, it would be their families too. Also, the hitman's, he's hardly going to tell Jack Wombs, Mick Steele and Darren Nichols his name and address, is he? Another thing as well, in Darren Nichols' police interview, he was asked about anything that was said on the journey with Mick Steele, and Darren Nichols' reply was, nothing, just normal chit-chat. Now, I think a lot was discussed in Mick Steele's Hilux on the journey to Brentwood. They would have been going over their plan to take out Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. Surely Mick Steele would have been nervous knowing he was about to commit his first murder. A lot would have been going through his mind on that journey. Nerves would have played a big part. I think they would have gone over their plan, talking about stop-off points before the murders would take place. A backup plan if anything went wrong that night. The timings. I mean, that would have been a topic of discussion, as that would have been very important. So to me, Darren Nichols has definitely held a lot back in his interviews and statements. So did they hire a hitman to take out Tucker, Tate and Rolfe? It is possible, according to Geoffrey Cousins' statement and Darren Nichols telling him he drove 2 men to the murder scene that night. Most of us have all seen the murder scene pictures, and when the topic of a contract killer doing the murders comes up, there's always one side of the argument where people say, well, the shots are so clinical and precise, the killer was a professional with no hesitation of committing murder. And on the other side, people say it's such a close distance with a pump-action shotgun, close to 3 men's heads. How can you miss? One last thing I just want to mention is who actually owned the Volkswagen Passat at the time of the murders. To me, this is significant to the case as to who owned it at the time of the murders. What vehicle did Jack Wombs say had broken down that night and was asked by Darren Nichols to pick up? Was it the Volkswagen Passat? The reason I ask this is Darren Nichols says he sold the Volkswagen Passat to Jack Wombs some time ago before the murders. Which car did he say he picked up that night for Darren Nichols that had broken down? It couldn't have been the Volkswagen Passat. According to Darren Nichols, he was driving a white Golf convertible at the time, and he said he used to get to Marks T. Darren Nichols states that he drove to Marks T that evening in his white Golf convertible. He left it nearby Ron Parkinson's shop, outside some flats, and he got into Mick Steele's red Hilux, and that Jack Wombs followed them in the Volkswagen Passat. All the prosecution or defence had to do was check with DVLA who owned the Volkswagen Passat and who it was sold to. Check the logbook details to see who was telling the truth and who was lying. I'm sure I've read it somewhere. Jack Wombs said he sold it and it was used for stock car racing, and it was found by the police with the help of Jack Wombs, so it could be tested for fingerprints and blood residue. Darren Nichols definitely says in his statement that he sold the car to Jack Wombs way before the murders took place. It was an old knackered car and wasn't worth much. Did the prosecution or defence check to see if Darren Nichols had a white Golf convertible back then? I mean, let's not forget, Darren Nichols was also driving a Volkswagen Scirocco back then. As a work colleague of his, Colin Bridge, said in his statement, Darren Nichols was driving back then. Colin Bridge states that they went to work at Sunbury-on-Thames in the beginning of the December, then goes on to say that when they got back from work, him, Darren Nichols and other work colleagues stopped off in a pub for 1 to 2 hours. Then he drove Darren Nichols back home in Darren Nichols' Scirocco. So this could have been checked with DVLA. Also, which is not to say Darren Nichols, it's not to say if he didn't have 2 vehicles back then, which I suppose is not unusual. But if he was the owner of the Volkswagen Passat, he would have owned 3 cars back then. The last thing I want to mention about these cars is if Jack Wombs was telling the truth about picking up Darren Nichols' broken down car in Rettington that night, then why didn't the defence ask Darren Nichols which car it was and what happened to it? Did it go into a garage to be fixed? Maybe there would have been a receipt, or have it logged on the garage's computer that some work had been carried out on one of Darren Nichols' vehicles. If it was a cash-in-hand job, does anyone at the garage remember doing any work on any of Darren Nichols' cars back then? If Jack Wombs was telling the truth, then why did he not instruct his defence team to look into this? Surely this could have gone some way into proving that one of Darren Nichols' cars did break down that night, and he had some work done on it at a garage a few days after the murders took place. Or did Jack Wombs just make this weak story up after he found out the prosecution had evidence of him being in the Rettington area the night of the triple murders? The more you look at this case, the more you see there is a lack of evidence to prove Jack Wombs and Mick Steele's innocence. And their explanations for being in the area the night are so weak. All the other evidence and prosecution had on them that night overweighs the defence's explanations to me. I mean, the prosecution have to put their case forward that proves beyond reasonable doubt that Mick Steele and Jack Wombs are guilty of the Essex Boys murders to a jury. So what I'll do is leave it there for now, and we will come back to Darren Nichols parked up on Meadow Road. In fact, we'll just go there now. So here we are on Meadow Road. Darren Nichols, he's already dropped Jack Wombs off at the track. He's driven up towards Chelmsford. Sees the petrol station on the left, and he's turned round. He's parked at a pub car park, the Wheat Sheaf, on the left. He can't get a signal, so he drives back down past the track. He finds this road here on the left, and he's driven in, and he's probably driven all the way down here. Turn round at this part here, and he says in his statement he parked up at the house on the left near the road, which would have been this house here, and he's basically just waiting for the phone call from Jack Wombs to come and pick him up. So yeah, I'll leave it there for now. Thank you to the YouTube subscribers. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Don't forget, there's the Facebook page called The Real Essex Boys Murder Club. If you're interested, please feel free to join. We have over 19,000 members now, and there's posts going on there on a daily basis. Last of all, I'd just like to thank the admins for keeping the group ticking over. It's much appreciated. So until next time, take care.